Hi, so this is my newer zine from this year, the Casual Dice Guide for Literally Anyone, but it's volume 2 by Panda, which is me. There's like these 3D-ish sort of renderings of dice where the background is dark, and that was actually made with cyanotype, so it was actually blue paper and then it was white dice, but I scanned it in black and white and adjusted it a little bit, so that was cool. It was just naturally the plastic sort of reflected some light from it, and it kind of did a 3D thing when it doesn't always usually do that. And so, which dice are which review? TTRPG dice usually come in sets of 7 and in roughly these shapes. So there's this triangular pyramid, which is 4. There's a square, which is 6, which would be actually a cube. There's this 8 with a triangle. There's a 10, which is this sort of kite-shaped face, and there would be 10 sides on there. And there's a 0, which is the highest number. There's these double O's, and that's a percentage die or a percentile die. There's this 12, and it's a pentagon, a face, so that's a nice shape I like. And 20 has the little, this very small triangle, and it's this bigger dice usually. I mean, well, there's 20 sides on it. So that's the D4, the D6, the D8, the D10, the D percentile, the D12, and the D20. So honestly, if you're having trouble remembering each dice, it just takes practice. You just gotta be looking at them. You just have to quickly look at dice, put them in your hand, feel the shapes. So this is a triangle, but then there's like kind of a few triangles peeking out from there, so that would be a 2 on a D8. You just can sort of tell after a while, you know. These are photos of real dice, and then the face is like highlighted here, so that's what they are. And this would be 20 on a D percentile. You know, it's this kite shape, and then you know it's a percentile dice just because it's a 2-digit number. And then here, there's a little pentagon. So a pentagon faces the D12, and there's a 3 there. It's just upside down, as you can see. A 3 on a D12. So a couple things to remember. This is still about reading dice. In most cases, you read the number on top of the dice for the result, but a D4 does not lay flat. It's a little different. So as I said, D4 often does not lie flat, so you have to find the number which is oriented right side up when you look at it flat on a table. I mean, resting on a table, so it won't always be the top number or the bottom number. It's just whatever is oriented up, so that's it. There's a 3 and a 4 that's downward, and the 2 is upward. Here, these are oriented, you know, diagonally and upside down. So 3 is the number, which is more of an old school sort of dice, but I've seen it coming back a little bit, so in case you don't know that, that's how you read a D4. And some dice also use icons, so generally it represents the highest number on a die. Double check before rolling if you still aren't very familiar with the dice, or a dice could be like, if it's a skull or a oh no, could be a 1. So that's why you have to check your dice. You have to check your die. You have to know them before you roll them. So this die shows a GG, and it's like a cube shape, and it's a GG from Arizona Gamers Guild. And you can read dice, but what about some common jargon? So this is where volume 2 gets a little bit different, and it is definitely dependent on what games you play, so it varies on what games you play, but we'll discuss some common terms. So did someone say XDY question mark? So for that, an example is 2d6, pronounced that way, and so that would mean you need to roll 2 of the 6-sided die. So 2 of the cube-shaped die, 2d6, Yeah. For example, 2d6 would mean rolling 2 of your 6-sided dice, and then you could add them, or it depends how the game is. So if you add them, this is a 3, and this is that GG logo again, so that's 3 plus 6, which equals 9. And then what if someone says 4d12? So that's 4 dice of the 12-sided dice, the ones with the little pentagon faces, and they have 12 sides, obviously. So you could roll these. This is an example of 4 dice. There's a 3, a 2, and a 1, and an 8. So 3 plus 2 plus 1 is 3, and then plus 8, that's 14. That's 6 plus 8, which is 14, correct. And then high rolls and low rolls is something that you might encounter in a game. So sometimes if they make you roll multiple dice, or if they say advantage or disadvantage, that's a different thing. So some games may ask you to roll with advantage or take the high roll. That means you roll an additional die and take the greater number as the result. So here's an example. There's 2 d20s. You want the high roll. And there's a 17 and a 9. So obviously 17 is greater than 9. So 17 is the high roll. And so using these same dice as an example, if you were given disadvantage or the low roll in your game, it's when you add the die and then take the lowest number. So 9 is less than 17, so the result would be your disadvantage is a 9. And here I note, as I sort of mentioned earlier, in some systems in specific cases, like a multi-dice roll with advantage, players add 1 extra die and drop the lowest, or for highest roll, or drop highest from a low roll and then add the results of the remaining dice. So same idea, but going from the opposite of high and then to low. So but okay, also some common jargon we're still going over. When someone says nat, it stands for natural, and then that means from the dice alone, without any stat modifiers, without any modifications from their character sheets or anything, that's what they rolled. So you rolled it naturally. So a nat 1, usually bad, but sometimes you want a lower or high roll depending on what game you're playing. But a nat 1 means you naturally rolled a natural 1, smallest number on the dice. And then natural 20, woohoo, natural 20, a nat 20, that's a natural 20. And that is the highest dice rolled in a standard dice set. So that's what that is. And then I just briefly say a dirty 20 means the opposite of natural, so your result equal to 20 with the roll plus added bonuses or modifiers included. And I don't discuss specifics here because it's highly dependent on what TTRPG, what tabletop role-playing game system you are playing. So I have a little curious thinker guy symbol. That was a little aside. So we're going to test our knowledge. We tested our knowledge in the first one. We'll test it again. And so we're going to consider these rolls, and there's two dice. So we're going to do adding the total. We're going to say if this was a roll and there was an advantage, what would the number be? If there was a disadvantage, the high roll or the low roll, what would that be? And then also for a bonus, you can say which dice shapes these are. And I have a typo here that I will discuss later. But here, there's the 1, and there's this sort of kite shape, or diamond shape sort of face with, you can see a couple of the sides on the other sides of either of them. So there's this 6, because there's a 6 and a dot next to it. So it's not a 9, it's a 6. And then there's a 4. So if this was a roll where you're adding up the 2 d10s, then that would be a 10 from 2 d10s. And then if this was an advantage roll, you would have got a 6. If this was a disadvantage roll, you would have got a 4. And then going on to the next one, it's this triangle shape, but it's like, you can see the sides of onto the left and the right and below it. So that's a D8 if you can remember. just by the shape of it. So there's a 1 and a 2 rolled. So if you total those, that'd be a 3. That's a 3 on 2d8. And then if it was an advantage for this d8 roll, it would have been of a 2, which isn't too great, or a disadvantage, it would have been a 1. And then going on, here's some dice. They're different looking dice, right? And it's that pentagon face. So that would mean it's a 12, a d12. So if you're rolling these 2d12, there's this logo. And for this dice, the logo is good. I didn't show any examples of the logo being bad. So this pumpkin, this jack-o'-lantern, by Q Workshop, by the way. That's a 12 and that's an 8. So the total is 20. If we're looking for advantage, you got a 12, which is the highest roll on that type of dice. And if it's disadvantage, that's an 8 on a d12, which is not bad. And I said, I hope I helped demystify dice a little for you, but there's a typo. And happy rolling. And in the back, there's some credits, there's some links, there's the answers that I already went over about what those example problems / rolls, the answers were. So that's upside down on the cover. But so the Dark GG dice, that's by Arizona Gamers Guild. Local shop here, they're pretty cool. The Halloween D12 dice was by Q Workshop, and pretty much all of them were Chessex dice except for the one that had the this here at the bottom. But yeah. So my links, Linktree is linktr.ee/pandakong, patreon.com/pandakong. IG is at instapandakong, and most places at pandakong. And so, and then a note, if you want even more basic, there's the Casual Dice Guide for Literally Anyone Volume 1, which is literally just reading the dice. So that could help you recognize the dice. And yeah, and there's a d20, which is a usually good roll. So that's the Casual Dice Guide for Literally Anyone, and I read it out loud for you here in case you can't read, or you can't read English, or low vision or blind. So yeah, so thanks for watching.